Every time you start getting ahead financially, something resets you back to zero. A new expense, a better lifestyle, a bigger commitment. And over time, you stop questioning it because it feels like progress. Most people believe financial progress is simple. You work harder, you earn more, and slowly your life improves. A better phone, a more comfortable apartment, maybe a car, maybe even a home. From the outside, it looks like you're moving forward. And to be fair, you are at least on the surface. Because every upgrade feels earned. Every new expense feels justified. Every decision feels like a reward for your effort. So you keep going. Year after year, your income increases. Your lifestyle improves. But somehow, your sense of freedom doesn't. You're still dependent on the next paycheck, still tied to your job, still unable to step away without consequences. And at some point, a quiet question starts to form. If everything is getting better, why does it still feel like I can't leave? The problem is not that your life isn't improving. It's that every improvement comes with a hidden cost, one that quietly takes away your ability to walk away. You earn more, so you upgrade. You upgrade, so your commitments grow. And once they grow, they don't go back down. What feels like moving forward is often just a subtle exchange. You trade a little more comfort for a little less freedom. And over time, without realizing it, you don't build a life you can control. You build a life you're no longer allowed to leave. This is Mind Over System, where we break down the invisible patterns and ideas that quietly shape how you live, earn, and choose. Way 1. You start spending to match who you think you've become. It rarely starts with something irrational. In fact, it usually feels completely justified. You work harder. You earn more, so naturally, you want your life to reflect that. A better phone doesn't feel like excess. It feels like alignment. A nicer apartment doesn't feel like a burden. It feels like you're finally catching up to where you should have been. And that's exactly how the shift begins. Because at some point, you stop asking, do I need this? And you start asking, does this match who I am now? That subtle change turns spending into something deeper than utility. It becomes identity. You're no longer just buying things for function. You're buying them to confirm a version of yourself. And once your identity is tied to what you own, cutting back no longer feels like a smart decision. It feels like going backwards. So even when your income increases, your expenses rise almost automatically. Not because you have to, but because it feels wrong not to. And that's the first reset. You move forward financially, but your baseline quietly moves with you, leaving you in the exact same position, just at a higher level. Way 2. The upgrade that slowly locks you in. If the first reset happens through identity, the second happens through commitment. This is where your life doesn't just get better. It becomes heavier. At first, it still feels like progress. You move to a better place. You buy a car. You take on something more permanent, something that feels like stability. And on the surface, it all makes sense. You're not wasting money. You're building a life. But what changes is not just what you own. It's what you owe. Because the moment your lifestyle is built on fixed costs, rent, loans, monthly payments, responsibilities, your flexibility starts to disappear. You can't just walk away anymore. Not from your job. Not from a bad situation. Not even from a path you no longer believe in. Because now, it's no longer about what you want. It's about what you have to maintain. And that's the shift most people never notice. They think they're upgrading their life, but what they're really doing is increasing the cost of staying alive in it. So even when opportunities appear to rest, to rethink, to change direction, they can't take them. Not because they don't want to, but because their life has been structured in a way that doesn't allow it. And that's the second reset. You gain more, but you lose the ability to choose. Way 3. You're paid just enough to keep going, but never enough to stop. By the time you reach this stage, nothing feels obviously wrong anymore. You have a stable job, a steady income, a life that, on paper, is working. And that's exactly why the reset becomes invisible. Because the way you earn money hasn't changed. Only the amount has. You're still trading time for income, hour by hour, day by day. And no matter how much that income grows, it only exists as long as you keep showing up. So your entire life starts to revolve around continuity. You can't pause. You can't step away. You can't afford to stop earning, even for a short period of time, not because you're failing, but because your income was never designed to create distance from work. It was designed to keep you inside it. And this is where the 3 resets come together. You spend more to match who you've become. You commit more to sustain the life you've built. And you depend entirely on a system that requires your constant presence. At that point, the trap is complete. You're not stuck because of a single bad decision. You're stuck because every part of your life now depends on you staying exactly where you are. You can see this pattern almost everywhere once you start paying attention. People earning twice as much as they did 5 years ago, but still feeling just as financially tight. Young professionals upgrading their lifestyle with every promotion, yet becoming more anxious, not less. Entire cities built around people who look successful on the outside, but are quietly dependent on their next paycheck to sustain that image. And it's not because they're irresponsible. In fact, most of them are doing exactly what they were taught to do. Work hard, earn more, build a better life. But what rarely gets questioned is this: why does a better life almost always come with less room to breathe? Why does progress feel so visible, yet freedom feels so far away? Take 2 people in their mid-20s. They both graduate, get their first job, and start earning a stable income. At first, their lives look almost identical. But over time, their choices begin to diverge. The first person follows the natural path. A raise comes in, so they upgrade their lifestyle. A better apartment, a new phone, eventually, a car. Each decision feels reasonable, even deserved. But slowly, their monthly costs rise. Their commitments grow. And without realizing it, their life becomes something that requires constant income to sustain. The second person doesn't look very different at the beginning. Same salary, same environment. But instead of upgrading immediately, they hold back. Not because they don't want more, but because they want space. Space to say no. Space to pause. Space to walk away if they need to. 5 years later, the difference isn't just in what they own. It's in how much control they have over their time. One has built a life that looks better. The other has built a life they can actually leave. And when you zoom out, this pattern doesn't just exist at the individual level. It becomes the default structure of an entire society. Because when enough people are locked into lives they can't afford to pause, the system doesn't need to force anyone to stay. People stay on their own. They keep working, keep upgrading, keep maintaining. not necessarily because they want more, but because they can't afford to have less. Over time, this creates a quiet form of pressure, where success is measured by visible upgrades, but rarely by invisible freedom, where stepping back looks like failure, even when moving forward feels exhausting. And eventually, an entire generation can end up chasing a version of life that looks better from the outside, but feels harder to escape from the inside. At some point, the question stops being how much you earn. It becomes how much of your life you can afford to not sell. Because income can grow and still leave you exactly where you started. But freedom works differently. It doesn't come from having more. It comes from needing less to keep your life running. And if every upgrade increases what your life demands from you, then progress by itself doesn't move you closer to freedom. It just makes the cost of leaving higher. So maybe the goal was never just to earn more. Maybe it was to understand what your life starts demanding every time you do. Because not every upgrade is a step forward. Some of them are decisions that quietly shape how much control you'll have later. And once you begin to see that, you don't need to reject progress. You just stop assuming that all progress leads to freedom. At some point, your life will look exactly like what you once wanted. More comfort, more stability, more proof that you're moving forward. And that's the moment most people stop questioning anything. Because from the outside, everything finally makes sense. But the real question was never how good your life looks when you're inside it. It's whether you still have the ability to step outside of it without everything falling apart. And most people don't realize the answer until it's already too late to change it.